When Wild Bill Hickok was shot and killed in Deadwood, you might expect shock and mourning, but for many in the camp, the real feeling was relief. They said it was finally over. The date was August 2nd, 1876. The place was Nuttall and Mann's Saloon Number 10, a rough establishment in the chaotic, lawless mining camp of Deadwood, nestled in the Black Hills of Dakota Territory. The man slumped over the poker table, a single bullet in the back of his head, was James Butler Hickok. To the world, he was Wild Bill, the Prince of Pistoliers, the most famous and feared gunman of the American West. His death, in the popular imagination, was a tragic assassination, the callous murder of a hero by a cowardly nobody seeking fame. This story is different. It argues that Hickok's death was an ending that had been written chapter by chapter over the course of a lifetime. It was the final, inevitable consequence of a personality forged in violence, a reputation built on exaggeration, and a persona that had become a fatal trap. To understand why Wild Bill had to die, we must first separate the man, James Butler Hickok, from the myth that killed him. The myth began, as many do, on the pages of a magazine. In February of 1867, Harper's new monthly magazine published an article by a writer named George Ward Nichols. The article, simply titled Wild Bill, was a sensation. It introduced the nation to a figure of almost superhuman prowess. Nichols Hickok was a peerless scout, a noble lawman, and a gunfighter who, by his own account, killed more than 100 men. This was the birth of the legend. The article made him a star. But what happened when a man is forced to live up to a legend he didn't create, especially when that legend is built on violence? The man Nichols wrote about was not yet the celebrity the article made him. James Butler Hickok was a man of modest regional reputation. The Harper's article changed everything. It gave him a role to play, and it's a role that would inhabit the rest of his life. Without that article, he might never have been appointed the Marshal of Abilene. Instead, he became the living embodiment of the Wild West gunman. The real James Butler Hickok was a far more complex figure. He was, by all accounts, intensely vain. A correspondent who met him on campaign noted that Hickok was by nature a dandy. He described Hickok appearing in an immaculate boiled shirt and a sleeveless Zouvet jacket of startling scarlet. General George Armstrong Custer wrote that Hickok's costume blended the immaculate neatness of the dandy with the extravagant taste and style of the frontiersman. With his profusion of light brown hair falling over his shoulders and a carefully cultivated mustache, he looked less like a hardened frontiersman and more like an actor playing one. His professional life was quite unstable. The legend paints him as a dedicated career lawman. The reality was that James Butler Hickok was a drifter. He never held a job for long. His terms as a law officer each lasted less than a year. He served sporadically as a scout. His one consistent activity, his one true vocation, was gambling. He spent most of his time at the card table, and his lack of steady income led him to being run out of at least 2 towns for vagrancy. Beneath the flamboyant clothes was a volatile and dangerous man. A Nebraska acquaintance concluded that Hickok was quick to take offense and even quicker to take action. He himself admitted to killing men, adding with a dangerous gleam in his eyes that he never allowed a man to get the drop on him. This was the code of a man who lived by the gun, a man who escalated conflict. His reputation, as one woman politely put it, was not at all credible. His first documented killing would become the most controversial of his life. The legend calls it a heroic defense against a gang of outlaws. The evidence, however, suggests something far closer to cold-blooded murder. The incident at Rock Creek Station in 1861 began as an argument over money. From behind a curtain, Hickok shot the station keeper. He then participated in the killing of 2 other men. He was tried and acquitted, but their circumstances point not to self-defense, but to a ruthless, one-sided slaughter. 4 years later, in Springfield, Missouri, came the encounter that most closely resembles the classic Western duel. Hickok faced a gambler named David Tutt in the town square over a gambling debt. Hickok shot Tutt dead. He was acquitted again, But the local community was not impressed. The editor of the Springfield, Missouri Weekly Patriot expressed the town's horror, writing that the citizens were shocked and terrified. To the people of Springfield, this was a terrifying display of violence, not heroism, that had no place in a civilized town. The citizens of Abilene, Kansas hired America's most famous gunmen to bring peace to their town. But instead of order, Wild Bill brought more bloodshed, even killing one of his own men. How could the Prince of Pistoliers make such a fatal mistake? In a confrontation with a Texas gambler named Phil Coe, Hickok shot and killed him. In the confusion and smoke of the gunfight, he saw another figure running towards him. He fired instantly. It was his own special deputy, Mike Williams, rushing to his aid. It was a tragic, reckless mistake, born from the same impulse to shoot first. The trail of violence had consequences. Hickok created enemies. In Abilene, after killing Coe, he became so paranoid about revenge that he slept with a loaded shotgun. The great gunfighter was terrified. His fame had become a cage. It attracted challengers, and it created a constant pressure to live up to his own deadly reputation. Throughout his life, one simple rule had always kept Hickok alive: never sit with your back to a door. It was a precaution born of paranoia and experience. But on August 2nd, 1876, for the first and last time, he would break that rule. But the question is, why? By the summer of 1876, James Butler Hickok was 39 years old. His health was possibly failing, his eyesight rumored to be in decline. He arrived in Deadwood and did what he always did. He played poker. On that fateful afternoon in saloon number 10, the only seat available at the card game, put his back to the door. He asked another player to switch seats twice. The man refused. Hickok, uncharacteristically, relented and took the dangerous chair. The man who pulled the trigger was a drifter named Jack McCall. His stated motive was revenge for a murdered brother, a claim for which no evidence has ever been found. Was this the real reason, or was McCall simply the instrument of a town that had grown tired of its celebrity gunmen? McCall walked quietly behind Hickok, drew a .45 caliber Colt, and fired a single shot. Hickok pitched forward on the table, dead instantly. The cards reportedly in his hand, 2 black aces and 2 black eights, would become the dead man's hand. McCall was captured and put on trial the next day in a miner's court, a makeshift legal system with no official authority. But he told the story of revenge. It worked. The jury acquitted him. As one old-timer recalled, the sentiment in the hills was pretty much with McCall, for Wild Bill did not have many friends in that camp. Deadwood felt relieved over his removal. McCall, freed, made a fatal mistake. He traveled to Laramie, where he got drunk and bragged about killing the most famous desperado in the West. Federal authorities ruled his first trial meaningless. He was arrested, taken to Yankton, and put on trial for murder in a legitimate court. This time he was found guilty and hanged. The story of the dead man's hand itself is a piece of myth-making that defined Hickok's life. The bartender who witnessed the shooting never mentioned the specific cards. The story of aces and eights first appeared in a biography written 50 years later, provided by a notorious Black Hills storyteller. It was too good to check. It became fact. The legend only grew in death. Hickok's grave in Deadwood immediately became a tourist attraction. His original wooden headstone was whittled away by souvenir hunters. A stone monument suffered the same fate. When his body was moved to a new cemetery, it was said to be petrified, hard as stone, adding another supernatural layer to the myth. James Butler Hickok was not a hero who tamed the West. He was a self-conscious performer, a man who dressed for a role and acted a part given to him by the dime novels of the day, the cheap, sensationalized paperbacks that were popular entertainment of the era. He was a man with a volatile temper and the propensity for violence that left a trail of dead men and bitter enemies. In the end, Wild Bill Hickok had to die because his time ran out. He was a man built for a chaotic frontier that was rapidly disappearing, a performer whose violent act had grown stale. The very qualities that made him a legend, his quick temper, his deadly skill, and his carefully crafted fame, were the same qualities that guaranteed his demise in a town that was ready to move on.